Aw, yeah, it's time for another episode of Ahsoka Abridged, the recap show where Mr. Shoff and I talk all about Ahsoka. This week, part 5, Shadow Warrior. Now, Shoff, first of all, Shoff, before we get into it, how you doing, sir?
I'm good. Thanks for asking. How are you?
I'm excellent. I'm excellent because Dave Filoni is cooking, Daddy. He's going crazy all over the place. We'll talk about that shortly. But I did want to say this episode we're going to be talking about is part 5, Shadow Warrior. If you haven't seen it, pause this episode, go watch it because we're going to be spoiling everything. Unless you like spoilers, which if that case, stay, have a chat, and then we'll have a good time. We always leave your comments down below, leave your thoughts, sharing theories, everything. We want to hear it, Shaw. We love when people are talking Star Wars theories. I had a very long conversation last night at my job with a bunch of my coworkers who I didn't know were Star Wars fans. But once they knew that I was, then it just let
the
the
floodgates just open. That's always
It
a
was
good
a great
feeling
time.
too when you meet a fellow geek that you didn't think was a geek in that way, like especially for the content that really gets yourself in like a tizzy, it's like,
Yeah.
that is the best feeling, because then you're like,
And I'll give
did
you-
we just become best friends?
I'll give you a quick example. So my basically the guy who was training me, he was talking to me and he was like, "Yeah, I like Legend of Zelda." And he pulls his shirt down, has a full chest tattoo of Zelda. And I was like, I had no idea that he liked video games, let alone just Zelda. So it was a fun conversation.
And nobody triforced him to do it.
He literally had a Triforce on his chest. I was like,
was it like his nipple in the center and then the triangles
it was
around
right
it?
above that? It was almost like but this, we should do a Zelda podcast at some point, Shaw. But this podcast is a Star Wars Ahsoka podcast. So last week we talked and we said this was our favorite episode of the season. Shaw, part 5, is part 5 now your favorite episode, or is it still part 4?
That's a really good question. I hadn't even considered ranking the two against each other, but I have to say, okay, so I'm going to say this with a caveat. So I think had I watched the entirety of Clone Wars,
Yes.
all 7 seasons,
Yes.
and then seen episode 5, probably I would have said episode 5 is the best episode of the season for Ahsoka. But since I haven't, and I'm still in season 1, I'm probably about 6 or 7 episodes deep into season 1. I have to say episode 4 still stands out as the best episode of this season so far.
Okay, that makes sense. And I keep forgetting that you haven't gone down that Clone Wars rabbit hole yet, that you haven't fully finished. I should say you're starting down that path. You opened up the rabbit hole, but you haven't fully completed it. So when I was watching this episode, first of all, 90% of the episode, I had goosebumps. The hair on my arm was standing up. It was like Peter Parker in Infinity War. My spider senses were tingling because of that history of the Clone Wars, going on that journey and spending so much time, so many episodes with Ahsoka, and her evolution. This, first of all, seeing Hayden Christensen as Anakin is always a treat for me. But in this one in particular, having the Clone Wars haircut, having the Clone Wars armor, I was like, I didn't know that I needed this in my life. I was very happy when I saw that because it's just something that you've never seen in live action before. Like I've spent so much time with that character animated, and then to see the guy who originated the role in live action playing the animated version. So it was like the chocolate and the peanut butter coming together, Shop, and it was good. I was loving every moment that I was seeing. And I think we had talked previously, Shop, whether it was off mic or on mic, I can't remember, but we talked about, I think, giving Hayden Christensen his flowers, because kind of the same thing with Ahmed Best, where he just got dumped on for the prequels. Anakin Skywalker's ruining the trilogy, his wooden acting. But with Obi-Wan, and now I think with Ahsoka, he's just had this kind of resurgence of
Mhm.
fan love, and people who grew up with the prequels kind of, like, maturing and getting older and like, "Oh, man, this is my childhood, and this is what he represents," and I'm really loving that he's getting the same with Ahmed Best, that they're actually getting to see their work being received well, and it makes me sad for Ray Stevenson that he is not seeing
Yeah.
people enjoying his work. But your thoughts, Shaw, on Hayden Christensen's performance as Anakin, and we'll talk about what happened in the storyline. But what do you think? What did you
Yeah.
just think about him playing Anakin again?
Well, I loved it. I loved it. And I've never really had like a negative view of his performance. I never thought that he's the reason why the prequels were not great. That just never really like entered my brain when I was watching it. I just felt like the prequels just didn't land the same way that the original trilogy did, in the same way that aspects of the sequel trilogy didn't really land either. So,
Right.
um but his performance I thought was really excellent. The de-aging was enough for me to buy it, and also not too much where it was like too porcelain, like where he's too
Yes.
polished looking.
Right.
My only issue with, and it's not him specifically, it's just the nature of what we're doing here, is you're getting an older actor to come back and play a younger version of himself, and his voice
Mm.
sounds
Yeah.
older. Like
Right.
you
Right.
can tell there's a little bit of gravel in it.
Right.
And as much as you can de-age a face, it's much, much harder, if not near impossible, to de-age a voice.
Right.
And I think that's kind of where it comes down to, because that's going to be on him to be able to reach that higher register, to not get real low like that. And
Right.
so I think that's the only thing. When I was watching, I could tell that he was older in that regard. And that threw me a little bit, at least took me out of it just a tad, but not enough to where I couldn't appreciate it or enjoy it. But I just think like this is what happens when you're going to get the same actor who has aged. And I'm not even sure how many years have passed since the filming of Attack of the Clones or something like that.
Yeah, that was
But wow, I mean, he's still great, and I'm so glad that he's finally getting that love. What did you think?
right. I loved it. I want to say, let's see, Attack of the Clones was like 2002. It was released in 2002, so let's say they filmed it in 2001. Revenge of the Sith was 2005, so maybe they filmed it in 2004. And now we're coming back in 2023.
Yeah,
Um,
basically 20 years. That's crazy.
yeah, so that is very interesting, Shoff. And I love that you pick up on that because Shoff, everyone, is a fantastic voice actor. You can tell by his golden pipes, you can tell by his tone that he's a great voice actor, that he's got the sound for it. But as you see here, he's got the analytical mind of a voice actor. So I like whenever hearing Shoff's thoughts on voices, I'm always interested. But the two things with Anakin that I kind of was picking up on was the acting, his emotion of delivering the lines. And that's what I really want to spend a big chunk of this episode with you on, because I specifically held off. I don't know if you noticed this, Shaw, asking you about your thoughts on what is happening in this episode, what
Yeah,
happened in the
yeah.
world between worlds. So I'm going to get into that in a second. But the emotion of his just kind of connecting with Ahsoka and the lesson that he's teaching her. That was part one. And then part two was the lightsaber fighting.
Hmm.
Now, I this whole series, I think I've been kind of critical about the lightsaber fights, and it's because I want to see Duel of the Fates again. I want to see
Yeah.
Anakin and Obi-Wan, in episode 3 going back and forth. I think this series is fine. The lightsaber fighting is fine. But I think what's missing, Shoff, I was doing a little bit of research. The choreography is different. The choreographer, I should say, is different from the prequels to Ahsoka. And I guess, no shade to the choreographer on Ahsoka, but it is not a match for the prequels. And I saw that prequel choreographer said he wants to come back, and he said he wants to do more, so I don't know what Disney's doing, why they're not getting more work.
Interesting.
But also you have older actors with Hayden
Yeah.
Christensen and Rosario Dawson, both of them, not to say they're, senior citizens, but they're not 20 years old anymore. They're not, teenagers, so they're just not as, flexible or spry as they once were. So those scenes, I kind of held my suspension of disbelief a little bit because the characters are supposed to be, at their top, at their peak, you know, especially Anakin in this. So the lightsaber fighting, I can kind of give it a pass. I would have liked if it was a little bit more intense, a little bit faster. Um, but to me, it was fine. Actually, kind of surprising, Shoff, was the young actress, the younger Ahsoka, who I didn't realize it at the time because she's under a ton of
Yeah.
makeup. She was in Barbie and she was little Gamora
Yeah.
in
Oh yeah.
Endgame. So I was like, man, this actress she's kind of on a roll. She's got a couple. She's her her resume is building.
Yeah. If
But
you need to play a young alien, she's got it. She's cornered the market on young
yeah,
alien girls,
she's the
and
one.
great. She did such a great job, and I think that, I mean, part of me wishes that they could have de-aged Ashley Eckstein
Ooh, that
or
would have been
Eckstein. I
fun.
forget I don't know how you pronounce it, but
I've heard it both ways.
yeah, like, because then it would be a great way to bring her into the fold because she had the
Yeah,
younger
yeah.
voice.
Mm,
And
that would have
then
been.
like
Oh
that
man,
would have
that would
been
have been
so
great.
cool if
Yes.
they could have done that. But from a, the height perspective or giving that appearance of youth, like you have to have a younger actor. So but I think she did an excellent job, and she played the emotional beats well too. And even though that was her first scene with Hayden Christensen, you could tell that they had some chemistry, which was
Mm.
the best part, arguably, from what I've heard fans say about the Clone Wars, is the relationship between Ahsoka and Anakin. So
Yeah, I would say that was good for me, just me personally. Real quick aside, it was the getting to know the clones' personalities
oh
versus
yeah,
when you saw them in Attack of the Clones, they were just mindless clones, literally. Like they had faceless, mindless. We don't care about them. In the Clone Wars, they're given personalities. And shout out to D. Bradley Baker because he voiced every single clone and he changed every one. He gave them a different personality, even though he was doing this kind of the same voice. So I fell in love with the clones and I cared about them, especially by the end of the Clone Wars when Order 66 was happening. I had a lot more emotion in after seeing Clone Wars versus just seeing Attack of the Clones.
you could
So
say that watching that show gave you a raging cloner.
that would be a Shawfism for sure. Put that on a poster, put it on a t-shirt.
Put it
Uh,
on a t-shirt.
that would be great. But yeah, that like the flashbacks of key moments from the Clone Wars or key battles that you see portrayed in live action. I was like, man, I wish this was a movie. I wish I got like 2 hours of this. That for me was my wheelhouse. When I was watching this episode, I was in my happy place, Shoff. I was like, yes, this is Anakin. This is the Clone Wars. This is Ahsoka. So all of the reenactments, and they even got Tamora Morrison to come back and do the clone voices, who voiced Boba Fett. He played Boba Fett in the Boba Fett series, but in the live action movies, he voiced the clones.
Yeah.
So it
I'm a
was
little
fun getting
surprised
him to
by the
come
way
back.
that they didn't, in the scenes where they had them on like stretchers, like the various clone troopers that were injured, that there wasn't like a moment where you saw like the side profile of his
Right,
face.
right. I
I
think
was
that was
really
budget.
expecting to see that.
Yeah.
But I am glad that they got his voice back for
Yes.
Captain Rex. Yeah.
Yeah. I wonder if they were filming this during lockdown or like close to COVID or something. Like they couldn't get Tamora Morrison to fly out and film it or something.
Well,
Um,
he's kind of got like a unique relationship with Star Wars lately anyways, because he's
yeah,
been so
yeah,
outspoken
right.
about how he feels Mandalorian pretty much trounced on the
Mhm.
Book of Boba Fett, and that's why it wasn't as successful, because it was
Right.
so much less about Boba Fett. Entire
Right.
episodes didn't
Right.
even feature Boba Fett. So
Right.
I don't blame him for being upset, but I mean, if you're going to be outspoken to Disney, Star Wars, like you're going to suffer for work. And this is probably the extent of what they wanted him to be a part of. And
Yeah.
he might
And
have had
he
more to
seems
do if he wasn't, if he kept his mouth
right,
shut.
kind of political behind the scenes stuff. Yeah,
Yeah.
that is kind of a shame because it would have been great to, like you said, either a side profile or even remember when she kind of comforts the clone trooper as
Yeah.
he's dying, even just have that one be Tamora Morrison. Like out of all of them, just have that one with his face uncovered. You could have the rest of them with their helmets on. It
Totally.
didn't
Yeah.
necessarily need it, but um, nevertheless, like I said, it was a great scene of the Clone Wars and the key battles. But now's the meat and potato shop. I want to get your thoughts because I've kind of had a 360 on my opinion of this. So this whole episode, as they teased the last ending of the episode, was Ahsoka in the world between worlds. Now, I want to ask you this. First of all, what did you think? Did you enjoy the world between worlds? Did you enjoy the lesson that Anakin gave her?
I wish there had been more
Yes,
of it,
yes,
and also
yes.
more of using it. Yes, they did access past events, but I guess the question is, what we've seen of the world between worlds is you can influence time.
Actually, yes, right.
So if they're going back to these moments in the Clone Wars, are they influencing that moment with, new dialogue, new interactions for the two of them, or are they sort of like a holodeck situation? I don't want to use
Right.
a Star Trek reference, but I
Right.
did in a Star Wars property. But like, is it a holodeck, like a simulation where it's just meant to provide the training, sort of
Right.
like in the Matrix when just the blank slate is brought up and they can put it in any
Right.
program,
Right.
like
Right.
that's different than what we've seen in Rebels for how the world between worlds is treated.
Yes.
Plus, the idea of why Anakin is there brings up a lot of questions. Like, is he simply a Force ghost, and the world between worlds just allows you access to other Force ghosts, or, and I don't know all the details about this, but I have been reading a little bit. He's destined to become the father in that whole concept of the Mortis gods, which was something
That is a great
referenced
Actually,
in Clone Wars. Go ahead.
I'm wondering, are you gonna go in order or are you gonna skip ahead? Because
No, I'm not
that
going to skip
Mortis
ahead. No,
okay.
no,
I was gonna say
no.
that Mortis
I'll let
arc
it
is my
unfold
favorite.
organically, like
Okay.
it's supposed to. I mean, I do have the knowledge of stuff that's to come, just because of how long ago this was
Right.
this came out.
Right.
But I'm gonna let it happen in the
Okay.
natural order.
Man, I can't wait. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've had my world kind of turned upside down because originally I was thinking 100% this is the world between worlds. Now, after kind of reanalyzing it and reassessing it, I'm kind of leaning towards the holodeck matrix force dream approach. And the reason why, the thing that kind of tips me off, and I want to hear Dave Filoni, because I think right now, because of the strikes, we're not hearing as much stuff coming
Yeah,
from
that's true.
the creators behind this. Even though he was the director, he's also the writer. So the writers are on strike, but the directors are not. So I don't know exactly how much that what the legal ties on that is. But I want to hear from his mouth, first of all. So all of this stuff right now is conjecture. It's just kind of theories. There were no, like you said, accessing time points, and there were no portals.
Right.
It's just the bridge. And so every single time we saw the actual place in Rebels, there were portals. So that immediately tipped me off, and I said, something's not quite right here. The way that he smashed the bridge and it went into her going into that's not something we've ever seen before in
Sure.
Rebels. So, and like I felt like there was kind of a mist cloud. Like both of us haven't had a chance to rewatch the episode yet. We will be, but I felt like there was like a mist or a cloud, which usually signifies like a dream state in most things. And then at the end, when she's coming out of it, there's this water that comes up,
That's a cool
and
effect.
yeah, I like that. Water a lot of times has been used in certain TV shows and movies to kind of signify this dream state. You know, you're underwater, you're all of this. So I'm right now, as we record this, my thoughts are this was a forced dream, and she's
Okay.
been to the world between worlds before, so she knows what it looks like. She has that experience with it. So it's her in her mind fighting with herself, and that's not Anakin. That's her interpretation of Anakin,
Yeah.
and it's kind of more of her fighting with herself, and that's what that signifies. Her and Anakin dueling. It's her kind of struggles of because the whole thing about her is she carries this guilt that she's the reason he turned to the dark side. If she had been there for him, he would have never turned,
Mm,
because during that scene when he's pledging his oath to Palpatine, when he's giving himself to the dark side in episode 3, Ahsoka is off, and man, I can't wait till you get there. But in the Clone Wars, oh wait, no, you saw the last season, didn't you? Or was that
the last season
or you
of
did
what?
Clone Wars?
No, no. Like I said,
Oh,
I'm
okay,
going
I'm
in
sorry.
order. Yeah.
Somebody else I was talking to.
Yeah.
The you see where she's at that moment. So she's kind of like, man, if I had been there,
Hmm.
or even if she had not turned away from the Jedi at all, if she had just stayed with the Jedi, she could have prevented the downfall of Anakin and therefore the
Mm,
galaxy. So she's been carrying this weight and this burden. And this is signifying her kind of almost not forgiving herself, but kind of giving herself permission to be like, okay, it wasn't your fault.
right.
You can get past this. And this is where this Ahsoka the White is coming in. When she comes
Yeah.
in with her white cloak, she's purified. She's like, I don't need to carry the burden anymore. That was kind of my
Yeah.
thinking at
You're
that point.
right on. I kind of got the same vibe, and also the aspect of water, like we were talking about, the symbolism of that is a rebirth.
Yes,
So,
yes, baptism.
and water
Yes,
is used when you're
yes,
being baptized, right? So, like
yes.
the idea of
Hmm.
dunking and coming out, and you're purified from those sins. You've recommitted
Yes,
yourself to whatever doctrine you
right.
have in that regard. So, and like you said, she's had her Gandalf moment. She's now Ahsoka the White and not Ahsoka
Yes.
the Gray. And a lot of people were kind of like, after seeing the end of Rebels, they're like, well, Ahsoka should have already been in her white
Mm,
robes at the start of the Ahsoka show. But Dave Filoni has gone on record and said that she needs to have this process of time to work through the burdens of loss. I was writing down, I was
right.
like, she's so heavily burdened by the loss of all these clone troopers that were her
Yes.
friends and
Yep.
family.
Mhm.
Anakin, fellow Jedi after the Purge, Ezra. I mean, there's so many people she's lost, and that, if that's the explanation as to why she's so stoic and why she's so reserved in the Ahsoka show, I hope that we get to see, and we saw a glimpse of it at the end of this episode, a much more exuberant,
Yes.
outgoing,
Yes.
smiling
Yes.
Ahsoka after she reemerged and after she woke up. By the way, we saw her hairline, if you want to call
Yeah.
it that,
Right.
and that was unsettling. I do not
Very
need to see that
strange.
anymore. Keep the headband on, Ahsoka.
Which we've seen that in Clone Wars before, and it didn't look like that. So, sorry, makeup department, but yeah, that was a little unsettling,
That was
seeing that.
almost like they forgot to put it back on. It didn't
Right.
seem like a deliberate thing. It was like, oh
Yeah.
shoot. So it's like the equivalent of the guy standing over in the corner during like the Mando episode, or
Right.
the water bottles just randomly
Right.
appearing,
Right. Yeah. That's
So
what I got. That was my kind of interpretation of it. But yeah, I'm very interested to see where this goes. And like you said, if that is the Ahsoka we get from now on, then I will be okay with the reserved, because we talked about that. We have shorts of us talking about Rosario Dawson's portrayal of Ahsoka being so different. And we got a lot of comments. We got a lot of
yeah,
feedback of people saying it's because of this, because of the burden, because of her age. A lot of people are like, yeah, well, when you're in your 40s, you don't act like you did when you were 18. Yes, I understand that. But
not true. Look at all these Legos behind me. I'm 40 and I can finally afford my
Yes.
passions.
Yes,
So
yes.
yeah, I'm still a kid at heart.
Disposable income is a great thing. But it if
Money,
this if they give us an actual, you know, evolution of her character and even just an explanation, like I said, and I've talked about this before, just give me one line of dialogue that explains it, and then I'll be okay with it. That's fine. So you don't need to leave any comments. If you're listening to it after it's already happened and you're like, see, you were wrong. Okay, I'm talking at this moment when part 5 is out. This is our thoughts. Um, so yeah, I really enjoyed kind of her, like you said, you could see the weight and the burden lifted from her. So that it's giving me hope that what we're going to see in the next couple episodes is a little bit more bubbly Ahsoka than the one that we've got. Um, did you have any thoughts, Shoff, on the Jason and Hera bits where Jason can hear her
hmm
fighting in either the dream or the world between worlds, whatever it ends up being? What did you think about that in his kind of force sensitivity?
I love that. I'm glad that they included it. It gave him something to do because otherwise he's
Right,
kind of just along for the ride. So
right,
he had a valuable part to play in this mission.
right.
Um, and also it makes sense, right? I mean, he is the son of Kanan Jarrus. But I think what it does more than anything else is the fact that his mom, Hera, can also tap into it, reinforces the message that I think this entire series is trying to get across, which is that the Force resides in all living things,
I agree.
and that it's not about only Jedi can access the Force, can sense
Yes.
the Force, can utilize the Force. Jason has a natural, if you want to call it, midichlorian count that's higher,
Hmm.
that's giving
Right.
him, from a talent perspective, he can hone it faster than say Sabine could or Hera could, but it's there. And even Hera was able to tap into it and hear what Jason was hearing. So that tells me that it is an accessible ability, um, at varying levels
Right.
of proficiency,
Right.
but that everyone can hone the Force abilities, which was kind of the message of The Last Jedi that a lot of people
Hmm.
didn't really like or accept,
Hmm.
is
Right.
that you don't have to be a Skywalker,
Right.
to be
Right.
a Jedi, or
Yes.
to use the Force, or to what all this or that. So I love that. I love that, and that's an
Yeah.
inclusive aspect of the
Yes.
franchise that I'm enjoying.
Yeah, and I like that too. And like you said, I've seen the fandom kind of be divided on that, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. And I'm leaning towards the good side. It
Yeah,
opens up a lot of story potential in the future, as well. So I'm very interested to see where this series leads to, and then where the rest of Star Wars leads to. Because after this, Shaw, we got the Filoni movie, we've got the Ray movie, which I don't know like what the story at all is going to be there, because that is going to be the furthest
yeah.
point in the future of Star Wars that we've ever seen. So what happens there? Does she rebuild the Jedi Academy, or does she become her own thing? Like, does she create her own thing? So we'll see what happens in both of those things as we look forward to it. Anything else? Closing thoughts, Shaw, on Part 5, Shadow Warrior?
I love the final Purgle scene where
Oh
she's
yes,
talking
yes,
to
yes,
him,
yes.
and she basically convinces one of the space whales to let her hang out on his tongue,
Yeah,
for a
call him
little
Moby.
mouth ride.
Yeah.
And we get to see them in live action take the hyperspace,
Yes,
activate the hyperdrive,
right.
which was really
That
really
was
cool.
from
I
the
was really
inside.
hoping and expecting that we would see Thrawn or Ezra
Just
towards
a
the end of
glimpse
the
of them.
episode, but after seeing kind of how much time they were spending in the past in these moments with Anakin and Ahsoka, and that was clearly the focus of the episode, I was like, oh yeah, this is not happening this episode.
Right,
I think I thought it was going to happen because Filoni was writing and directing this one, so I was like,
right.
I mean,
This will be the live action
he's got to be involved in that, but
debut. Right.
I mean, I guess I kind of hope it's not a situation where it's just a tease in the final minutes of, is it going to be 8 episodes?
Yes. So we have
Okay, so
2,
like in the 8th episode, like the last 5 minutes right before
3
the
left.
credits
Right.
is him walking onto Morgan Elsbeth's ship. Like, we've seen that clip. We know that he's on her ship at some point. But I really, really, really hope it's not just a quick tease and then we're leaving it for the movie to explore. But I kind of fear that it's going to be. Because if it's a quick tease, to me, that is not fair to Ahsoka, that this show is just a building block.
Right. Yeah.
You know?
I have a bad feeling about this show. I think that is what it is going to be, and it's kind of disappointing. But there is a little bit of hope because most of the trailers footage that had been released has already been shown in these, even before part 5.
Yeah.
Most of them were the first 4 episodes, and then that Thrawn Elon Musk image that everybody's talking about, that we still have not seen yet. But there is actually a little bit of Anakin footage that we also saw. There's a line that was not in this episode, so I'm hoping that is not just a deleted thing. We'll never see it. I'm hoping actually there is a little bit more with Hayden Christensen, just because I love his performance that he's giving at this point. But we'll see in the future in the coming episodes as we continue to talk about Ahsoka each and every week here on Ahsoka Abridged. Shaw, thank you very much for joining me. You're always a pleasure to talk to, sir. And like I said, bringing your voice actor analysis is always fantastic.
Thank you. Yeah. I love being a part of the Vactor-Verse. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. I want to thank everyone for listening. If you're watching on YouTube, thank you very much. Don't forget, if you have any comments or questions, things that you want to talk about, leave it in the comments and we will talk about it on the next episode of Ahsoka Abridged.